Sometimes the truth can be more terrifying than any lie. For 25 years, she kept this secret, trying to forget, pretending it never happened. But one day, everything changed. One word, one confession, and her entire life collapsed in an instant. Why did she stay silent for so long? What secret was she hiding? And most importantly, what will be the consequences for her and those around her? Stay until the end of this story, and you'll discover how a single secret can destroy everything. I have always known that my husband had his secrets, but what I discovered many years ago surpassed all my expectations. He was not just cheating on me. He was trying to erase me from our future daughter's life by replacing my eggs with the genetic material of his ideal woman before the IVF procedure. I did not throw a scene. I did not scream. I did not break down in tears. I simply changed the game in silence. I put everything back in its place, and while I was at it, I replaced his sperm with the DNA of the only man who was truly meant to be my child's father. 25 years later, when I thought the ghosts of the past had finally been left behind, a woman stormed into our house, crying and filling the air with hysterical screams. "Darling, I am your real mother." Isabel had just returned home from a long medical project abroad. She had not even fully stepped inside the house when she found herself at the center of a drama worthy of a Hollywood script. The living room was packed. Distant relatives we had not seen in years had gathered as if for an important ceremony. But there was only one central figure in this chaos. Veronica Smith sitting in the middle of the couch, playing the role of a martyr, and next to her was him, Richard Wallace, my perfect husband, who had preferred to play the role of a ghost for most of our marriage. And now, this ghost was holding his mistress's hand, whispering words of comfort to her as if they were enduring the greatest tragedy together. I frowned, placed my suitcase on the floor, and looked straight at him. "What's the celebration? Why are there so many people here?" Isabel stepped beside me, crossing her arms over her chest. Her gaze landed on Veronica with an expression of undeniable disgust. She already knew exactly who this woman was. Miriam Wallace, my mother-in-law, sat in the center of the room, her eyes darting back and forth. She looked confused, as if she did not know which side she should be on. Before Richard could open his mouth, Veronica jumped to her feet, rushed toward Isabel, and bursting into tears cried out, "Darling, I am your real mother." Isabel did not move. She simply stepped aside gracefully, avoiding Veronica's touch as if she were something dirty. Her voice came out clear, cold, and emotionless. "My mother's name is Lauren Brooks." A wave of pride surged through me. That was my girl. I took her hand, letting her know she was not alone. Then slowly I raised my other hand and slapped Veronica across the face with all my strength. The sharp sound of the impact echoed through the room. Veronica froze, her mouth slightly open in silent shock. "Do not dare to come into my house and put on this circus," I said in an icy tone, my gaze sharper than a blade. Richard jumped to his feet, immediately grabbing Veronica by the shoulders to help her up. Then he pointed a furious finger at me and roared, "Lauren, have you completely lost your mind? How dare you hit Veronica?" Richard roared so loudly that the walls of the mansion seemed to tremble. His face contorted with rage and his eyes shot daggers. He took a step forward and without hesitation raised his hand, ready to strike me. But before he could even touch me, the sharp sound of a slap echoed through the room. It was Isabel. "You dare raise your hand against my mother?" Her voice was calm, but there was such authority in it that the entire room froze. Richard stood still as if someone had pressed pause. His hand remained suspended in midair, and his face held an expression of rage mixed with utter shock. But this man never backed down so easily. He clenched his jaw, and now with a fresh wave of fury, raised his hand again, this time to strike Isabel. I barely had time to inhale when suddenly Veronica lunged forward, clutching his arm, her face streaked with tears. "Richard, no, please don't." Her voice trembled and her face twisted in theatrical agony, but I knew her too well. Her performance was worthy of an Oscar, yet to me, it looked pathetic. Richard, momentarily thrown off by her sudden display of maternal concern, lowered his hand, but his gaze, still full of rage, was now locked onto Isabel. "If it weren't for your real mother, I would have already taught you a lesson," he hissed. Isabel let out a cold, sharp laugh, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Oh, really? I'd love to see you try." Her voice was like ice, her gaze sharp and piercing. It was my gaze. At that moment, I saw myself in her. Suddenly, a low cough broke the heavy silence. "Everyone, calm down," a deep, authoritative voice commanded. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward the person who had remained in the shadows until now. Miriam Wallace rose from her seat. Despite her age, her posture was regal, and her voice carried an undeniable authority. She fixed her gaze on her son, studying him for a long moment. "Richard, explain to me what is going on here. Why have you gathered all these people?" Richard took a deep breath as if gathering courage. Then, without looking away from me or Isabel, he wrapped his arm around Veronica's shoulders, displaying his so-called deep love for her. "I have an important announcement to make today," he said, pausing dramatically. Slowly he scanned the entire room. I watched him in silence, though inside I was burning. What kind of performance is he about to put on this time? But his next words hit the room like a bomb. "Isabel is not Lauren's biological daughter." His voice was low, but the impact was deafening. Gasps filled the room. A chorus of whispers erupted. Isabel's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with shock. I did not let her speak. I simply locked eyes with her, and with the slightest motion of my hand gave her a silent message. "Stay calm. This fight is far from over." The relatives around us began whispering, like a pack of sharks that had smelled blood. A nervous tension filled the air. They were eager to witness this family spectacle unfold, and then Richard opened his mouth. "Lauren, understand, I never wanted to hurt you. It's just that your eggs weren't good enough, so I replaced them with Veronica's." He said it as if he was the hero of his own story. I stared at him, and rage boiled inside me. This man, this deceitful, calculating man, was now trying to paint me as the villain in his own betrayal. Richard slowly looked me up and down, his gaze filled with triumphant malice, as if he was expecting me to break down, to scream, to throw something, as if he was waiting for the moment I would lose control. He enjoyed his luxurious life, but he had miscalculated one thing. I didn't marry him for love. I married him to secure my position as a Wallace and take control of the Wallace Group. I shrugged, as if discussing the weather. "Divorce? Fine, I don't care." Then I gave him a cold, piercing look. "But there's no need for a DNA test. I know Isabel is my daughter." At that moment, Isabel looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes, ironclad certainty. "Mom, I believe you." I felt the energy shift. Veronica and Richard stiffened. They hadn't expected this. "Isabel, you don't believe your father?" Richard's voice lost its usual confidence. "Isabel, sweetheart, please listen to me." Veronica took a desperate step forward, reaching out, and then the door swung open. A young man stormed into the room, tall, dark-haired, looking like a college student. He walked straight toward Isabel, his face full of emotion. "Sister." Dead silence. As if one extra mother wasn't enough, now my daughter had a brother out of nowhere. I studied him carefully, his features. There was something familiar about them. He looked like Veronica, and then it hit me. I turned to Richard, then to Veronica. They had kept the secret for over 20 years. They had hidden him from me all his life. But now, here he was. This show was getting even better than I expected. Miriam, who had been sitting at the head of the room, suddenly turned to her son. Her voice, usually composed, now trembled with something new. Fury. "Richard, what is going on here?" Diego swallowed hard and looked at Isabel. He looked like he was about to cry. "Sister, my name is Diego. I've always known about you." His voice shook. He stole a glance at me, then quickly looked away, as if expecting me to scold him. My mom always told me about you." He swallowed again, his voice cracking. "She said you were talented and beautiful, and then—" A dramatic sob. "Veronica." She covered her mouth with a handkerchief, her shoulders trembling. What a performance. Too bad I was never a good audience. "Isabel, sweetheart daughter, I have missed you so much all these years." Veronica's voice trembled as she lifted her tear-filled eyes toward her. She looked as if she had suffered the greatest injustice. "Daniel always wanted to meet you too." Daniel quickly nodded, playing along with his mother's act. "It's true, sister," he added enthusiastically. "I even enrolled in your school just to be closer to you." He pulled a stack of photographs from his pocket and handed them to Isabel with an almost sacred reverence, as if he were giving her something more than just pictures. "These are your photos." I took them in secret. Isabel took the pictures and began flipping through them. There she was, beaming in her graduation gown, exhausted after dance practice, debating with classmates, her eyes burning with passion and determination. A shiver ran down her spine. Years of being watched, photographed in secret. Her grip tightened around the photos as she slowly lifted her gaze to Daniel. He was smiling, as if he had no idea how incredibly disturbing this was. Meanwhile, Richard wasn't wasting time either. He approached his mother, his posture firm, his voice full of confidence. "Mother, this is the grandson of the Wallace family. All the elders are here to witness it. Please accept him." He knew exactly what he was doing. Ever since his father's passing, his mother had the final say in the family. He understood that if he wanted to legitimize Daniel, he had to secure her approval. The relatives watched in silence, waiting for her response. Richard was certain. If his mother accepted Daniel, I would have no argument left. He knew that over 25 years of marriage, I had always respected her, never challenged her, always obeyed her will. Daniel moved quickly, stepping forward with calculated innocence. He looked at Miriam with an almost devoted expression and spoke with reverence. "Grandmother." A tense silence filled the room. Miriam looked at Daniel, then shifted her gaze to me. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She didn't respond right away. I knew she respected me, but I also knew she was a woman of tradition. I refused to let her be put in a difficult position, so I spoke first. "Richard, you're trying to legitimize your illegitimate son so he can inherit the Wallace family business, aren't you?" My voice was calm, but every word was a blade. "So why involve Isabel?" The room froze. Richard's response never came, because he was interrupted by footsteps, firm, purposeful, echoing down the corridor. Before Richard could even open his mouth, a deep, steady voice rang through the room, because he has always known that Isabel was never his daughter, Lauren. Silence. Every head in the room snapped toward the doorway. There he stood, Mark Clark, my former love, the man I had once given my heart to, and now one of the most renowned surgeons in the world. He looked exactly the same as I remembered him, but what struck me the most were his eyes. That golden brown gaze, the same eyes Isabel had inherited. He stood with absolute certainty, his expression filled with calm resolve. Richard turned pale, and I felt the game shift. I saw the color drain from Richard's face. His arrogance vanished. Veronica, who had been playing the grieving mother just moments ago, now clung to his arm like a lifeline. Daniel, this so-called brother of Isabel, instinctively took a step back. He looked lost. Mark's appearance was shattering their carefully constructed lives. Miriam Wallace, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward in her chair. Her piercing gaze moved over each of us. She had always been a woman who could see through people, and now, in her eyes, I saw what I already knew. In her mind, everything was finally coming together. She was starting to understand the truth. Richard swallowed hard, his voice trembling. What is the meaning of this?" There was no more confidence, only fear. "Who do you think you are, barging into my house like this?" Mark stepped forward. His presence commanded the entire room, his aura of strength undeniable. "Your house, Richard?" he asked with a mocking smile. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "The house Lauren maintained with her hard work while you betrayed her?" He paused and then delivered the final blow. "The house where you raised a daughter who was never yours?" A heavy silence filled the room, the kind of silence where you can hear a man's world collapsing. Isabel stepped forward. She had been watching everything in silence, but now, in her golden brown eyes, I saw fear, realization, understanding. She looked at me, she looked at Mark, and I saw, piece by piece, the puzzle finally coming together in her mind. "Mom." Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling. "What is happening?" I took her hand in mine. She was shaking. I could feel her world shattering. For 25 years I had kept this secret, but the moment of truth had arrived. The very truth I had protected ever since that night in the fertility clinic, the night I discovered Richard and Veronica's scheme. I took a deep breath. "My love." I tried to keep my voice steady, but emotion tightened around my throat. "When we decided to try IVF, I found out that your father, that Richard, was planning to replace my eggs with Veronica's." Isabel froze. The relatives breathed faster. Whispers of tension filled the air, but I wasn't done. I looked straight into my daughter's eyes. But what he didn't know was that that night I made my own decision. Silence. A pause, filled with electricity. Veronica, who had been playing the victim, suddenly tore off her mask, her face twisted in rage and fear. She stepped forward, her voice breaking with hysteria. "You're lying." Her hands clenched into fists. "Isabel is my daughter." She was practically screaming. "My eggs, my blood." Her voice echoed in the silent room, but now no one believed her, because the truth was finally coming to light. Mark stepped forward, placing himself between me and Veronica. His presence was an impenetrable shield. "No, Veronica." His voice was icy, a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension in the room. "Isabel is Lauren's daughter, and mine. Every detail of her face, every movement, every talent. That is our legacy." He locked eyes with Veronica, his gaze burning with cold fire. "Have you ever wondered why she looks nothing like you? Nothing like Richard?" The words dropped like a bomb. Silence consumed the room. Miriam rose from her chair. Her face was frozen in shock. Slowly she walked toward Isabel. Her eyes, she whispered. She leaned in closer, studying my daughter's face as if seeing her for the first time. I always wondered where she got those eyes. Her voice trembled. No Wallace has that color. Richard stood frozen. I saw something click in his mind, like a puzzle that had finally come together, and then he exploded. This is absurd, a conspiracy. He lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. Lauren, how dare you? His voice cracked. You deceived me. You made me raise another man's child. I laughed bitterly. This man, this liar, this traitor who had cheated on me for years, and now he had the audacity to call himself a victim? I stepped forward, not breaking eye contact. I deceived you, Richard? Me? I took another step. Who tried to swap out my eggs without my consent? Another step. Who hid an entire secret family with his mistress? I saw his hands tremble, but I wasn't done. Who wanted to use Isabel as a pawn in his twisted game of manipulation? Richard's face contorted with fury. He lunged at me. The air in the room thickened. The collision was inevitable. You destroyed my life. His voice roared under the high ceilings. 25 years. I raised a bastard, thinking she was my daughter. You stole my right to be a father. But before he could lay a finger on me, Isabel stepped between us. She moved forward, delicate yet unshakable as steel. Her golden brown eyes burned with a fire of rage I had never seen before, the same eyes as Mark's. A bastard? Her voice slashed through the air like a blade. A man who cheated on my mother for years, who hid an illegitimate son, who tried to falsify a medical procedure. She took another step forward. And you, Richard, dare to call me a bastard? She looked him straight in the eyes. Richard staggered back. His lips trembled. He was afraid of her, afraid of the daughter who had never been his. He had nothing left to hide behind. Mark moved forward with the same feline grace that had always defined him. His presence felt like fate itself. Richard instinctively stepped back. The air in the room was stretched taut, like the sky before a storm. The static of tension crackled through the space. Choose your words carefully when speaking about my daughter, Richard. Mark's voice was calm, but within it lay a veiled threat. Don't forget, I have all the evidence of what you tried to do at the clinic. He paused. Every document, every video, every witness. Everything is documented and stored in a secure location. A heavy silence swallowed the room. Richard went pale, his eyes darting wildly, and then Mark unzipped his black leather briefcase. The sound of the metal zipper sliding open was as loud as a gunshot in the dead stillness. A second passed, another. One by one, perfectly organized documents landed on the table. Veronica sprang up. Her face, once twisted with fake tears, was now distorted with fear and rage. This evidence means nothing, she shrieked, her voice trembling on the edge of hysteria. Isabel is my daughter. I carried her, my eggs, my blood, but no one was listening to her lies anymore. At that moment, Daniel made a subtle move toward the door, but before he could take a single step over the threshold, Isabel's ice-cold gaze froze him in place. He stopped dead. Where are you going, little brother? Her voice dripped with sarcasm. She took a single step forward, and Daniel seemed to shrink. You wanted to be part of this family so badly, didn't you? Her voice was cold as an Arctic wind. You followed me for years, took secret photographs, kept watch over me while your parents spun their web of lies. She folded her arms across her chest, her stance radiating power. Stay, she smiled, without a trace of warmth. This concerns you too. Daniel swallowed hard. Mark stepped closer to Isabel, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Now, the resemblance between them was undeniable. Your mother and I never wanted things to unfold this way, he said softly, but his voice rung with restrained emotion. But when we learned about Richard's plan, he trailed off. Mark looked at me. His eyes held admiration and a quiet longing. Something tightened in my chest. Memories of that night at the clinic crashed over me like a tidal wave. Shock, rage, and then calm, calculated clarity. I knew exactly what to do. Mark, who had just finished his residency at the time, became my salvation. He was the only person I could trust in that moment, and now he stood before me once again, protecting not just me, but also our daughter. Richard gathered the last remnants of his composure and made one final desperate attempt. He turned to Miriam, who had been silently watching everything unfold, her face an unreadable mask. Mom. His voice shook on the verge of breaking, but he fought to sound confident. Are you really going to let this woman destroy our family? Stain the Wallace name with these lies? Everything I did was for the company, for Dad's legacy. Miriam slowly rose from her seat. She looked small, yet her presence filled the room with authority. Her dark dress made her appear even more imposing, and her eyes, they had become deep wells of disappointment and restrained fury. Lies, Richard? Her voice trembled, not from fear, from rage. Lies just like the ones you fed me for years, like the child you hid from me, like your attempt to tamper with a medical procedure? Silence. Richard stared at her wordlessly, as if he no longer recognized his own mother. She stepped closer to Isabel. Gently, she cupped her face in her wrinkled hands. I saw the tears. For the first time. In all the years I had known Miriam Wallace, I had never seen her cry. Now I understand why you were always different, my girl. Her voice shook, but it was tender. She ran her hand across Isabel's cheek, as if she were trying to memorize every feature. That mind, that determination, those aren't Wallace traits. She turned to Mark and smiled. It was sad, filled with regret, but genuine. You are the spitting image of your real father. The room erupted in whispers. Some people were shocked, some were enthralled by the drama, and some were already calculating how this truth would affect their position in the company. Veronica watched her entire plan crumble into dust, and so she resorted to her last weapon, hysteria. This is a conspiracy, she screamed, her voice breaking into a shriek. Lauren and this man are lying. She stepped forward, her hands clenching into fists. I have proof that Isabel is my daughter. Mark smirked. His smile was so composed that Veronica instinctively recoiled. Proof? His voice was soft, but there was a threat hidden within it. Are you referring to the proof you faked with the help of the lab technician? Veronica froze. The same technician who is now ready to testify against you? Her face went ghostly pale. Or do you mean the documents you tried to alter at the clinic? Veronica collapsed onto the couch. She had lost. Her illusion of power and control had shattered completely. Richard stood frozen. He didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. Beads of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. I don't understand. He was speaking more to himself than to anyone else. If you knew what we were planning, he lifted his eyes to mine. For the first time, I saw fear in them. Why didn't you say anything then? Why did you wait 25 years? I laughed. The sound rippled through the silence, sharp as shattered glass. Do you really want to know, Richard? I stepped forward. I saw his shoulders tense. I waited because I wanted you to feel exactly what you tried to make me feel. I took another step. I wanted you to love Isabel. Another step. To watch her grow. I stood right in front of him now. To be proud of every one of her achievements, I locked eyes with him. Only for you to realize in the end that she was never yours. Silence. Richard didn't move, didn't breathe. He just stared at me as if his entire world had collapsed. Mark placed his hand on my shoulder. His touch sent a jolt through me. Years had passed, but he was still here, still with me. Lauren and I have stayed in touch all these years, he explained calmly, but in his voice there was warmth. Every birthday, every graduation, every milestone Isabel reached, he was there, even if only from the shadows. Isabel looked between us. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She clamped her hands over her mouth as if afraid to let out a sound, and then she whispered, "The letters." We both froze. The anonymous letters I got every year on my birthday. She slowly lifted her gaze to Mark. They had medical advice. She paused, realization sinking in. And words of encouragement. She swallowed hard. That was you? Mark nodded. His face softened, but there was still regret in his eyes. Years ago, he began, his voice low, filled with bitterness. I came across some irregularities in the clinic's records. He ran his hand over the documents on the table, as if reliving that moment. Forged signatures, altered documents. He slowly turned to Richard, his gaze piercing. But I refused to believe the truth. Silence. I didn't want to think that my own son was capable of such manipulation. Daniel took a step forward. For the first time that evening, he dared to speak. Dad, is it true? His voice trembled. You made me follow Isabel all these years for what? He looked at Richard as if seeing him for the first time. To protect your lies? Richard didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. All these years? Daniel stepped back, as if trying to create distance between them. You told me it was for the family, for the company, to hold on to power, his eyes filled with rage. But you were only protecting yourself. Veronica stepped forward. Daniel, listen. She reached for his hand, but he jerked away sharply. Don't touch me. His voice was filled with so much hatred that Veronica froze. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this story, please please subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow. And trust me, even more thrilling moments are ahead. Do you even know what it feels like to realize that your parents used you as a pawn in their twisted game? Veronica couldn't answer. She stood there, shaking from humiliation. I walked to the window. The sun was setting over the horizon. 25 years of lies, manipulation, and deception were disappearing with the day. I turned around. Tomorrow the board of directors will meet. Mark pulled another document from his briefcase. 15 years ago, he said calmly, Lauren and I created a secured trust for Isabel. He unfolded the papers and placed them in front of Richard. The majority of the company's shares belong to her, and they are protected by an international legal team. Richard paled, his face twisted in horror. Panic crashed over him like an avalanche. You can't do this. He shot up from his chair. This company belongs to the Wallace family. I smirked. The company? I took a slow step forward. This company belongs to the one who kept it afloat all these years. I stood right in front of him, locking eyes. Or do you actually believe I didn't know about the money you funneled to support your secret family? His face went white. He collapsed back into his chair. He stared into nothing. He had lost. For the first time in his life, I watched him. The hands he had been waving around in fury just moments ago now trembled on his knees. My words had been the final blow. Today, you didn't just lose your so-called daughter, Richard. I crossed my arms. You lost control over the company you thought was yours. I let the pause linger in the air. Then I finished. Every cent you stole, every forged document, every lie you told. I leaned in close and whispered in his ear, it's all documented. Isabel stepped up to the massive oak table, the very one where Richard had signed his fraudulent deals for years. Now that table belonged to her. With the meticulous precision of a lawyer, a skill she took great pride in, she reviewed the documents Mark had brought. Her eyes, inherited from her real father, scanned each page with an expression of both professional satisfaction and personal vengeance. She relished every uncovered crime. Everything is in order. A faint, almost triumphant smile touched her lips. With cold precision, she sorted the documents into neat stacks. Shares, trust fund, records of offshore bank transfers, evidence of embezzlement. She paused, savoring the silence of the moment, and then she delivered the final blow. We even have receipts for the gifts you bought Veronica with company money. Veronica exploded. Her carefully crafted victim persona crumbled in an instant. Her face, once flawlessly made up, was now smeared with streaks of mascara and tear-stained makeup. You can't do this to us. Her voice shook, teetering on the edge of hysteria. She shot up from the couch like a wounded animal. We have rights. Daniel has rights. We have been part of this family for years. Mark stepped forward. His voice remained calm, but firm. That steady, authoritative tone he used in the operating room when absolute composure was required in critical moments. Daniel will receive what is rightfully his under the law as Richard's son. He turned toward the young man. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. We are not like you. Mark let the words settle. We don't punish children for their parents' sins. Silence. Revenge has its limits, and a child's innocence is one of them. Daniel lifted his gaze. He hadn't expected mercy. He had expected hatred. Instead, he got justice. A storm of emotions flashed in his eyes. Shock, confusion, and shame. He realized he had been a pawn in his parents' game, and that realization shattered him from the inside. But that doesn't mean things will stay the same, I said. My voice was sharp as steel. I locked eyes with him. The photographs, the stalking, the intimidation. IT ends today. You are no longer a pawn in your parents' game. Daniel swallowed hard. Doña Miriam, who had remained silent all this time, finally spoke. Her voice trembled, not from fear, from years of restrained emotion. She looked at Isabel. I always wondered why you were different from us. She took a step closer. That passion for medicine, that sharp mind, that unbreakable resolve. Miriam paused and took a deep breath. Now it all makes sense. And her voice broke. Miriam Wallace rose, unhurried, with the same regal grace that had always defined her. She stepped forward, walking toward Mark. Despite her petite frame, she filled the entire room, not with words, with presence, with that unwavering authority that comes only with years and experience. She studied his face as if she had finally found the missing piece of a puzzle. A pause, a moment of absolute silence. You are a man of honor, Mark Clark. Her voice regained its former strength, steady, unshakable. Your actions prove it. You cared for your daughter from the shadows. You allowed her to grow up protected. She looked at him, pressing her lips together, but in her eyes there was respect. You gave up your right to be by her side for her own good. She paused. That takes far more courage than any performative fatherhood. Richard shot up from his chair, his face flushed with fury. He opened his mouth to object, but he never got the chance. His mother's gaze cut through him like a blade. The world around froze. Silence. Her voice was like a crack of a whip. Richard froze in place. The air in the room shattered like ice. You have already done enough damage. She stepped closer, now looking down at him. You have stained the Wallace name more than any scandal ever could. She took a deep breath as if preparing to put an end to this story. As of today, you are no longer the president of this company. Richard blinked, as if he hadn't heard, as if he refused to believe. I no longer trust your judgment. Another pause. She cast one final look at her son. Not as a businessman, not as a man. Silence. But this was a different kind of silence, not like before. This one weighed down, crushed. The relatives who had been watching the events unfold like a gripping soap opera now began whispering among themselves, a beehive buzzing with anticipation for their fallen king. Richard sat down. He no longer fought. He just stared into nothing, defeated, completely. Isabel stepped up to me. She gripped my hand tightly. Through that touch, she conveyed years of love and unwavering trust. Mom, her voice shook. All this time, she took a deep breath as if struggling to find the words. How did you bear the secret alone? She looked at me almost in horror. It must have been hell, living under the same roof with him, seeing him every day, knowing what he had tried to do. I looked at my daughter, feeling the weight I had carried for years finally lift from my shoulders, and the tears, the very tears I had held back for so long now flowed freely. I brushed her cheek. My voice broke, but it remained firm. I wasn't alone, my love. I smiled through my tears. Your father. I looked at Mark. He stood there, as he always had. Even from a distance, he was always there. I took a deep breath. Every decision I made was to protect you, to secure your future. I held her hand. And looking at you today, at the woman you have become, I smiled. I know that every sacrifice was worth it. Mark stepped closer to us, closing the circle of a family we were always meant to be. His presence, which had for years been only a shadow, protecting us from afar, was now tangible, real. The scent of his cologne blended with the fragrance of gardenias, which had always filled the living room, creating an atmosphere that was almost perfect. He took a deep breath. And now, his voice was heavy with emotion, sparks in his eyes burning like embers. If you'll allow me, I would like to make up for lost time. Silence. Though I was there for the most important moments, through letters and photographs, he looked at Isabel. Nothing compares to being here, with you, for real. Richard shot to his feet, one last desperate attempt. His sudden movement knocked the papers off the table. Evidence of his deceit scattered across the marble floor. They landed at his feet, as if confirming his downfall. This won't stand. His voice cracked into a shriek. He glanced around for support, but there was none. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. I have connections. I have power. His tirade was cut short by laughter, clear, crisp, like the chime of a bell. Isabel's laughter. It echoed through the walls of the mansion, her triumph, his defeat. She crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. With what evidence, Richard? Her voice was both soft and ruthless, just like Mark's. She took a step forward. The forged documents you and Veronica tried to use? Another step. Or perhaps the testimonies from the clinic staff who have already confessed to your attempted fraud? She walked toward him with confidence, her movements fluid, almost predatory. Each step echoed through the marble floor like a tolling bell, a death knell for his fate. She stopped in front of him. He turned pale. You know, her voice dropped to a near whisper. For years, I never understood why I never felt like I belonged to this family. She tilted her head, studying him with the curious gaze of a predator watching its prey. Why my interests were always different from yours. Why I was always drawn to medicine. She smirked. Now everything makes sense. Veronica let out a shriek. Until now, she had sat silently, pressed into the chair, but she finally cracked. You can't do this to us. She was trying to regain control, to cling to a last desperate hope. We are family. She grabbed Daniel's hand as if that could save her. Daniel needs his father, I stepped forward. My words were like a scalpel, sharp, precise, leaving no chance for healing. "What do you need, Veronica?" She froze. "The Wallace fortune?" I let the silence linger, let it weigh down. "Social status?" I met her gaze, unwavering. Or perhaps a pause. My lips curled into an icy smile. "The very funds Richard has been transferring to your Swiss bank account every month?" Veronica went white, as if the last drop of blood drained from her body. Miriam turned sharply to her son. In her eyes was rage, the rage of years suppressed. "Switzerland?" Her voice trembled with fury. "You've been funneling company money into offshore accounts?" Isabel reached for the table. She did not rush. She pulled out another document, deliberately, precisely, and handed it to her grandmother. Her voice was calm, but in it, there was satisfaction. "Here are all the records, grandmother." She let the moment settle. Every transaction, every cent, all perfectly documented. She smiled. "The international legal team my mother hired years ago has been tracking these transfers." The room fell into absolute silence. Everyone knew this was the end. Richard didn't move. He didn't explode in rage. He didn't fight back. He just stood there. He looked at the papers in his mother's hands, knowing, realizing, accepting that he had lost completely. Daniel, who had remained silent all this time, finally spoke. His voice trembled, not from fear, from disappointment. "Dad." He looked at Richard, as if seeing the real him for the first time. "Is it true?" Dead silence. "All the money you spent on my education abroad, on trips, on gifts." A pause. "It was all stolen money?" Richard averted his gaze. He couldn't look his son in the eyes, and in that moment Daniel understood everything. The answer was in the silence, a silence louder than any excuse. Mark stepped forward. His movements were calm, but in his gaze was the steel determination of a man who had waited for this moment for decades. He looked at me. "Lauren, I think it's time." I nodded silently. I knew exactly what he meant. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to Miriam. "Madam," I began, trying to keep a professional tone, though even I couldn't fully suppress the emotion in my voice. "This envelope contains my official resignation as CEO of Wallace Group." He paused. "Effective immediately." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard immediately smirked. He was sure he had won, but his triumph lasted exactly 3 seconds, because then I spoke again. "This envelope also contains the documentation transferring full control of the company to Isabel." I let the silence stretch. "Who, as we have now proven, is the rightful majority shareholder." Absolute silence, the kind of silence that comes before the collapse of entire empires. Miriam opened the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept reading, line by line. Her eyes widened with each sentence. When she finally looked up, in her gaze was a mix of admiration and deep respect. 25 years, she barely whispered it, but everyone in the room heard her words. "For 25 years you built this empire, strengthened it, while my own son tried to destroy it from within." She stood up, slowly, but with such authority that the room seemed to hold its breath. She looked straight into my eyes. "Lauren," her voice was firm, steady. "You have always been more to me than just a daughter-in-law." She paused. "You were the daughter I never had, the mother Isabel needed, the leader this company deserved." Richard started to protest, but his mother raised a hand sharply, and he stopped. Like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test, she turned to him. "And you?" Her voice turned to ice. It wasn't just anger, it was the weight of her realization. "You who tarnished the Wallace name with lies and betrayal. You who betrayed not only your wife," she paused, looked at Isabel, "but your own blood." She stopped, and then she let out a bitter laugh, but there was no joy in it, only disappointment. "Although now I understand," a pause, "that Isabel was never your blood." She took another pause and exhaled, as if releasing the last weight from her shoulders. "And perhaps that was our greatest blessing." The air in the room grew thick, thick like the sky before a storm. Relatives who had been whispering among themselves now remained silent. They realized that they were witnessing the end of an era, the fall of a king, and the rise of a new ruler. Isabel approached the table. With the confidence of a victor, she slowly took the documents from her grandmother's trembling hands, calmly, precisely, with the same meticulous, methodical approach she had inherited from Mark. Her eyes scanned the lines. Each page was her triumph. She nodded. "Everything is in order." Her voice was clear and firm. "As of this moment, I'm officially assuming the position of president of Wallace Group." She turned, looked directly at Richard and Veronica. They had retreated into the corner of the room, like trapped animals. She took a step forward, unhurriedly. "You have exactly 1 hour." Her voice was sharp as a blade. "To collect your personal belongings and vacate all company-owned properties." A pause. "This includes the mansion, the cars, and the offices." Veronica let out a sob. She choked on her own fear. "And where are we supposed to go?" Her voice broke. She was panicking. "Everything we had is here." Isabel smiled, a light, almost mocking smile, just like Mark's. "You should have thought about that sooner." Her voice was cold as ice. "When you decided to destroy my family." She paused deliberately. Although she tilted her head slightly as if contemplating something. "You still have your house in Switzerland." Her smile grew wider. "The one bought with stolen money." Daniel took a step forward. His voice was barely a whisper. "What about me?" Mark answered. His voice was unexpectedly soft. "As I've already said," he studied the young man carefully. "We do not punish children for their parents' mistakes. You may keep your position in the company if you choose." A pause. "But now, under strict supervision." He let a beat pass. Then, "And the photos." He held Daniel's gaze. "That ends today." Daniel nodded. His lips trembled. Tears of shame rolled down his cheeks. "I'm sorry." His voice broke. He met Isabel's eyes. "I truly am." Isabel studied him for several long seconds, then quietly said, "Time will tell if your apology is sincere." And then Richard exploded. Like a storm. Like a fallen king realizing his power was vanishing into oblivion. He took an aggressive step forward. "You can't do this to us!" His voice roared like thunder. "This company is my life, my legacy." Mark stepped between us. His calm, commanding presence instantly forced Richard to step back, not from fear, from understanding that he had lost. "Your legacy?" Mark stared straight into his eyes. "Is a web of lies and betrayals." He took a step closer. "Be grateful that we are simply taking the company." A pause. "And not taking this to court for fraud." The next few minutes passed in a blur. Security escorted Richard and Veronica out, gave them time to pack their things. The rest of the family watched in silence. No one came to their defense. Daniel hesitated at the exit. He turned, looked at Isabel. His gaze was filled with remorse, but she said nothing. She just watched them go. And then the room was empty. Only 3 remained, Mr. Isabel and Miriam. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 25 years, I could finally breathe. Isabel asked softly, "What do we do now?" Her voice was gentle, vulnerable, real. Mark took a step toward Isabel. He hesitated for a moment, as if giving her a choice. Then slowly he opened his arms, hesitant, careful, but she didn't hesitate. She rushed into his embrace, buried her face in his chest, held him tight, tighter than ever before, and finally let the tears flow. Tears she had held back for years. I stepped toward them and joined them. Now I looked at them, at us. Now we are who we were always meant to be. Miriam watched us with a sad but satisfied smile. She stepped closer. "The Wallace family has always been known for its business empire," she said softly. She looked at us. "But I think our true legacy begins only now." The sun was rising outside. The first golden rays streamed through the mansion's towering glass windows. They bathed the room in light, illuminating us, cleansing us, marking a new beginning. Mark looked at me. He took my hand, intertwined our fingers, as if the past 25 years had never existed. "You know," he whispered, his voice warm like the morning sun. I met his gaze. In his eyes, love, a promise. "They say revenge is a dish best served cold." He paused, smiled. "But it seems we've proven that it can also be the start of something beautiful." Isabel smiled, and for the first time in a long time, truly. Not out of mockery, not out of sarcasm, but like someone who was finally free. "Can we go have breakfast?" Her voice was light, alive. She sounded like the little girl I had always wanted to protect. I nodded. The 3 of us, like a real family. And then Miriam unexpectedly corrected me. Her voice was warm, but firm. "The 4 of us." We all turned to her in surprise. She smiled. "If of course you'll have me." We didn't answer, not with words, but with actions. We simply opened the circle for her, and she stepped into it, as part of us, as family. The sun rose higher, its light lit our path, as we left the Wallace mansion, not as victims of betrayal, but as the victors of our own story. Revenge was indeed sweet. But our greatest triumph wasn't Richard and Veronica's fall, it was that we could finally become a real family. And just like that, one hidden truth destroyed everything. But could she have done things differently? Could this disaster have been avoided, or was the truth bound to come out sooner or later? What do you think? Was this ending fair? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss the characters and their actions. What would you have done in their place? If you enjoyed this story, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new stories. Thank you for staying with me until the end. See you in the next stories.